The goat exploded. Not literally, but close enough when the rogue drone smashed into Mason Kane's battered tractor, sending splinters of old wood and tufts of goat hair everywhere as the startled animal bolted straight into his outdoor grill, knocking over 3 half-cooked steaks and toppling a 6-pack of cheap beer. Mason didn't even flinch. Instead, he lazily raised his battered sidearm, sighted down its rusted barrel, and shot the smoking wreck of the drone as if he were swatting a fly. The world around him was chaos. Animals running wild, barbecue ruined, and half a forest catching fire, and yet Mason calmly took a sip from his last surviving beer can, wiped his mouth with the back of a greasy hand, and muttered that line which would soon be heard around the galaxy. So much for retirement. The transmission that followed was short and blunt, relayed straight into the battered comms unit on his porch by a terrified junior operative from Earth's High Command. Sir, immediate priority mission. Assassins inbound to Earth. Priority target, Dr. Elena Chase. Kill or capture team dispatched by the Galactic King himself. We need you back. Mason leaned back in his splintered chair, casually watching as flames licked up the side of the ruined shed where the drone had hit. He wasn't surprised. He wasn't even angry. He was amused. They sent 5. The Galactic King sent 5 assassins to Earth to eliminate a biologist who, until this morning, Mason had never even heard of. That was interesting. That was also stupid. And the Galactic King, for all his power and paranoia, had clearly forgotten one crucial detail about Earth. When the galaxy comes hunting, Earth does not send an army. Earth sends one man. Mason Kane. Elsewhere, light years from Mason's burning backyard, 5 shadowy figures gathered in a silent chamber aboard a sleek black starship slipping through deep space. The assassins represented the finest killers from 5 species. They were legends, nightmares, whispered threats in every dark corner of the galaxy. Their mission was simple: kill Dr. Elena Chase, a human scientist living somewhere on Earth's northern hemisphere. The king himself had decreed it. No witnesses. No survivors. Clean and efficient. At least, that was the plan. What they did not know yet, what even their handlers failed to mention, was that Mason Kane had accepted the job. And Mason Kane did not play fair. Elena Chase sat cross-legged on the floor of her cluttered cabin in Alaska, peering through a microscope at a petri dish full of snail mucus. She hummed softly, completely unaware that her research into neurochemical adhesives had set off alarms in the Galactic Palace. The King's neurocontrol systems relied on a compound that Elena had inadvertently rendered obsolete in a recent paper published to exactly 14 subscribers of an obscure xenobiology journal. To her, the most urgent thing on her mind was a strange slug she had found yesterday that seemed to excrete a fluorescent enzyme. The galaxy, meanwhile, was already moving to erase her. Mason arrived just as the first assassin did. He didn't bother knocking. The snow crunched beneath his heavy boots as he strolled up to Elena's door, a battered duffel bag slung over his shoulder, his old sidearm tucked carelessly into a thigh holster, and a gleam in his eye that suggested either extreme competence or impending insanity. Before he could even raise a hand to knock, the wall next to the door caved in. A massive shape burst through, dragging a long spear-like weapon that glowed blue at its edges. Mason grinned. He stepped aside politely as the creature lunged, then slammed the butt of his weapon into the back of its knee with brutal precision. The assassin staggered, howling in a language Elena's translator would have struggled to identify, before Mason shot at once behind the ear. It fell. Mason crouched beside it, inspecting the armored body and the retractable blades on its arms, then gave a satisfied nod as if checking off a grocery list. 1 down. Inside, Elena was frozen, clutching a coffee mug that read Snail Whisperer. Mason let himself in. "Elena Chase?" he asked, glancing around the chaotic room full of microscopes, soil samples, and what appeared to be a half-eaten muffin with a tiny flag stuck in it labeled experimental. "Yes?" she squeaked. He flashed a smile, equal parts reassuring and terrifying. "Congratulations, you've just become the most wanted human in the galaxy." Before she could reply, an alarm shrieked from a device Mason had planted on the corpse outside. Another assassin inbound, 3 minutes out. He didn't waste time explaining. Instead, he grabbed her by the arm and half-carried her out the back door as he activated a remote detonator. Her entire porch erupted in flame as a second alien figure materialized in the snow, only to be thrown clear by the blast. As they fled into the forest, Mason kept up a running commentary that was both absurd and somehow comforting. Snail researcher, huh? You must have really ticked someone off. You don't even know the half of it. Did you know snails can regenerate some of their organs? Fascinating creatures. Mason laughed. The sound was rough and genuine. Lady, I hope you're as good with assassins as you are with mollusks, because we've got 5 of the best coming and I'm just one man. But then he added, almost as an afterthought, and one man is all Earth needs. Behind them, the forest was already coming alive with sensors and hidden drones Mason had seeded years ago, long before anyone thought Earth would need defending again. The Galactic King might have believed Earth was a soft target, but he was about to learn a hard lesson. And Mason Kane, laughing even as another distant explosion rocked the horizon, was more than happy to be the teacher. Snow crunched beneath Mason's boots as he led Alina deeper into the forest, weaving effortlessly through trees like a man who knew every branch and hidden path. Alina stumbled behind him, clutching a backpack Mason had unceremoniously stuffed with a few of her papers and a terrified pet snail she had insisted on saving. She was still processing the insanity of the last 10 minutes when Mason stopped suddenly, raised a hand, and crouched. She almost collided with him but froze when she saw what he saw, a ripple in the air about 20 meters ahead. It was subtle, a faint shimmer like heat haze against the cold winter landscape. But Mason was already smiling, that dangerous gleam in his eye returning. That's number 2, he muttered under his breath. The second assassin had chosen stealth, blending into the environment with perfect camouflage. It moved without sound, adjusting its form to match the tree bark and snow. Alina squinted, unable to truly see it, but Mason didn't need to. He reached into his coat and pulled out a strange device that looked like a battered thermos. With a flick, he cracked it open and sprayed a fine mist into the air. A moment later, the mist clung to the invisible figure, outlining a tall, insectoid form with too many limbs and long, barbed antennae. The assassin froze, realizing it had been revealed. Mason didn't hesitate. He yanked a flare gun from his belt and fired point-blank into the assassin's face. A brilliant burst of fire engulfed its head as the creature thrashed, hissing in a guttural language. Mason kicked it backward into a snowbank and drew his pistol for a clean follow-up shot. It took 2 rounds to drop the creature permanently. Alina couldn't stop staring at the body, part of her scientific mind still cataloging the anatomy even in shock. That thing was disguised as a tree, she whispered. Mason snorted as he started dragging the corpse away from their path. Yeah, and it would have impaled you with a tree branch if you'd kept walking. Welcome to your new reality. He paused to glance at her, reading the confusion and fear plain on her face. Look, I get it. Yesterday your biggest concern was snail mucus. Today, it's alien assassins. But trust me, this gets easier. Or maybe it doesn't, but it sure gets weirder. He tugged on a cord that revealed a camouflaged trapdoor in the snow. Beneath it was a tunnel, crude but secure. Down we go, he said. No more arguing. They descended into the tunnel, which wound downward into an underground bunker Mason had clearly built long ago. The walls were lined with old maps, tactical gear, shelves of ammunition, and bizarrely, a dartboard with the Galactic King's face crudely sketched onto it. Mason flicked on a bank of monitors, most showing static or feeds from small drones patrolling the forest. He tapped one that showed a tall, imposing figure approaching from the west. Assassin number 3. Mason's grin returned. This one's not subtle. Outside, the third assassin did not bother with stealth. It stood nearly 10 feet tall, clad in glistening black armor, its arms ending in integrated weapons bristling with energy nodes. It marched directly toward the bunker's hidden entrance, trampling trees in its path. Mason watched it approach, tapping a finger rhythmically against the console as if listening to a song only he could hear. You know, I thought retirement would be boring, he muttered to himself. turns out the galaxy's full of surprises. Then he turned to Alina, tossing her a small black box with a red button. Push that if things go very badly. What does it do? She asked, her voice wavering. It blows up this whole place, he replied cheerfully. Including us? Especially us. She stared at the box, horrified, but clutched it tightly anyway. Mason grabbed a large wrench from the wall and slung his old rifle across his back. Then he marched up the ladder leading back to the surface, whistling as he went. As soon as he reached ground level, the assassins spotted him and fired. A blast of searing energy tore through the trees, narrowly missing Mason as he dove sideways and rolled behind a fallen log. The assassin advanced, heavy footsteps crunching the snow as it raised both arms to fire again. Mason popped up from behind the log, aiming not at the assassin but at a snow-covered metal drum precariously perched on a branch overhead. His shot rang true, and the drum toppled, spilling gallons of thick oil over the assassin's armor. Before the creature could react, Mason flicked a lighter and tossed it forward. Flames erupted, engulfing the armored brute as it howled in rage. But this assassin was tougher than the others. Even burning, it continued to advance, swiping at Mason with one enormous arm. Mason ducked and rolled, grabbing a length of steel cable from his belt. He looped it around the assassin's legs, then sprinted in a wide arc around a tree, tying the other end of the cable around the trunk. The burning assassin toppled, crashing into the snow, but still struggling. Mason vaulted onto its chest and yanked open a maintenance hatch on the armor's torso. Inside was a maze of circuits and wires. Mason stared at them for a second, shrugged, then started ripping wires out indiscriminately. The assassin convulsed once, then went limp. Breathing hard but grinning like a lunatic, Mason dusted himself off and glanced toward the bunker entrance where Alina was peeking out. "That's 3, he called. "Just 2 more to go." Alina climbed out slowly, her face pale but determined. She glanced at the smoldering wreckage of the 3rd assassin, then at Mason. How do you even know how to fight things like this?" Mason chuckled. "Years of practice. Plus, they all tend to underestimate Earth. Makes it easier when they think we're primitives." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "But they forgot one thing. Earth has me." As they began packing up to move again, Mason's comm unit crackled unexpectedly. A voice came through, smooth and diplomatic, speaking perfect Earth standard. "Mason Kane, I presume? My name is Valor, and I am here to negotiate." Mason froze, recognizing the name instantly. Valor was not an assassin. He was a diplomat. Or at least, that was his cover. But Mason knew better. Valor was the 4th assassin. The most dangerous one yet, because he didn't just use weapons or stealth. He used words. Mason glanced at Alina, then at the tree-line where he knew Valor was waiting just out of sight. "This one's going to be tricky," he murmured. "Stay close and no matter what, don't listen to a word he says." Alina swallowed hard but nodded. Mason's expression hardened as he adjusted his rifle and stepped forward. The forest grew eerily quiet, snow falling gently as the next chapter of their fight began. Valor stepped calmly into view, dressed in immaculate robes that seemed completely out of place in the snowy Alaskan forest. His skin shimmered faintly, not a reflection of the environment, but a subtle manipulation of light that made him seem both real and unreal at once. His hands were raised, empty, palms outward in the universal gesture of peace. His voice was warm, smooth, almost hypnotic. "Mason Kane, you have a reputation. I have admired your work for many cycles. Let us talk. There is no need for further violence." Mason snorted but kept his rifle aimed squarely at Valor's chest. The diplomat assassin had the kind of face that looked incapable of lying, which made him the most dangerous of all. Mason had seen entire cities fall because of words spoken in that same calm tone. "You're here to negotiate?" Mason said, voice dripping with mockery. "Who exactly are you negotiating with, Valor? Me? Alina? Or the part of my brain you are about to try and scramble?" Valor smiled serenely. "Mason Kane, you mistake me. I come unarmed." Mason tilted his head, tapping a finger against his temple as he spoke to Alina without looking at her. This is the fourth assassin. He doesn't come with guns or knives. He comes with tricks and traps for the mind. Stay behind me, and whatever you hear, don't respond. He's already inside our heads. Alina shivered, clutching her pet snail tightly to her chest as if the tiny creature could offer protection from the assassin's soothing voice. Valor stepped closer. Mason could almost feel the psychic pressure starting, a creeping sensation at the back of his mind, like fingers gently brushing thoughts aside and replacing them with something softer, more reasonable. Why fight? Valor's voice seemed to echo, not just aloud but inside Mason's mind. Why not lay down your weapon, Mason Kane? You have done enough. You have earned rest. Warmth. Peace. For a heartbeat, Mason's grip on his rifle loosened. His knees nearly buckled as exhaustion rushed over him like a wave. The image formed in his mind unbidden, a quiet beach, sunlight on his face, no more battles, no more assassins, just endless peace. Then Mason laughed out loud, a harsh bark of amusement that startled Alina and even made Valor pause. You made one mistake, Mason said, grinning wildly. My mind isn't a quiet place you can whisper into, Valor. It's a hell's cape. I've lived there too long. You should never have stepped inside. The grin widened as Mason deliberately dropped his rifle, spread his arms, and said aloud, Come on then. Take a good long look around. Valor's serene expression faltered for the first time. A flicker of doubt crossed his features as he realized his psychic probe was not bending Mason's will but being dragged deeper into something far darker. Mason's memories swarmed around Valor's presence like a nest of angry wasps. Battlefields drenched in blood. Broken enemies begging for mercy. Missions where Mason had been ordered to eliminate entire outposts, and had done so with surgical precision and without hesitation. There was no peace to be found in Mason Kane's mind, only cold calculation and brutal efficiency. Valor staggered slightly, his hands trembling as Mason took a step forward. You should leave, Mason said quietly, but there was steel beneath the words. Before my mind makes you part of it. Valor's composure broke. His shimmering skin flickered erratically as he took several steps backward, the psychic connection severing abruptly. His eyes wide, his lips parted in something that might have been fear. Mason took advantage of the moment. He lunged, grabbing a small sphere from his belt and hurling it at Valor's feet. The sphere detonated in a flash of blinding light and concussive force, sending Valor sprawling into the snow. Before the assassin could recover, Mason was on him, wrenching one arm behind his back and slamming the butt of his pistol against Valor's temple. Once. Twice. 3 times. By the time Mason stood, Valor lay still. Not dead but unconscious. Mason wasn't done. He pulled out a set of restraints, binding Valor's hands and feet with practiced efficiency. We're keeping this one, he told Alina as she approached cautiously. He knows things we can use. Alina stared at Valor's motionless form, then at Mason. How did you resist him? Mason shrugged. My head's not exactly a nice place to visit. His humor faded quickly as he checked his comm unit. But we don't have much time to celebrate. Number 5 is coming. And this one's the worst. Even as he spoke, the ground beneath them trembled slightly. Not from an approaching figure but from something far larger. Alina looked around nervously. What is it? Mason sighed. The 5th assassin isn't just one thing. It's a weapon system. It was placed here years ago, disguised as part of our own defense network. Someone high up in Earth's command authorized it. It's already here and it's waking up. Alina's eyes widened as she began to grasp the scale of the betrayal. Mason didn't give her time to ask questions. He slung Valor's unconscious body over his shoulder and motioned for her to follow. They moved quickly through the trees, Mason taking shortcuts known only to him. But even as they ran, Mason was already formulating a plan. He had suspected for some time that Earth's leadership had been compromised. What he hadn't anticipated was that the final assassin would be one of their own, an old friend, a mentor, a man Mason had once trusted with his life. And now, that man had turned Earth's defenses against it. The fifth assassin wasn't an outsider. He was part of Earth's inner circle. As they reached a clearing, Mason pointed to a distant facility barely visible on the horizon, surrounded by security fences and automated turrets. "That's where we're going next," he said grimly. "That's where the last assassin waits." Alina hesitated. "Mason, who is he?" Mason's jaw tightened. "His name is General Arden. He trained me. He's the reason I survived my first missions. And now he's going to wish he hadn't." There was a bitterness in Mason's voice that chilled Alina more than the cold air around them. The stakes had just shifted again, and this time it wasn't just alien assassins they had to face. It was betrayal from within. As they set off toward the facility, the snow began to fall harder, wind whipping around them, carrying the faint hum of automated weapons powering up. The fifth assassin was ready. But so was Mason Kane. The cold wind cut across Mason's face as he led Alina toward the looming shape of the old military facility, its dark silhouette jagged against the gray sky. Razor wire curled along the perimeter, automated turrets tracking even birds that strayed too close. For a moment, it almost felt like coming home. Mason had trained here years ago, his sweat and blood spilled in these very fields, but now the base felt hollow, repurposed, corrupted. He could sense it in every automated sweep of the sentry guns and the patternless drone patrols above. The fifth assassin was already watching. General Arden was waiting. Mason crouched behind a snow-covered boulder, scanning the defenses as Alina knelt beside him, clutching Vaylor's unconscious body like an unwanted suitcase. Mason's voice was low, barely above a whisper, but sharp and focused. "Arden's not just hiding in there. He's controlling everything from inside. The entire base is his body now. Every turret, every drone, every sensor feed. He's embedded himself into the network." Alina's breath came in shaky bursts, visible in the freezing air. "This General Arden, he was your mentor?" Mason kept his eyes on the base as he answered, his tone clipped but not cold. "He taught me everything I know. Survival. Strategy. Execution. He knew how I think before I even did. If he's compromised, this whole facility is a trap designed just for me." A small smile played on Mason's lips as he checked the timer on his wrist device. "Which means he expects me to come straight in the front gate. But we're not doing that." Alina furrowed her brow. "Then how?" Mason tapped a spot on the map projected from his wrist device, a hidden maintenance tunnel that ran under the perimeter and led straight to the command center. "I built this tunnel with my own hands when I was still stationed here. Arden may control everything above ground, but he forgot about what's below." He turned to Alina, his expression deadly serious. "Once we're inside, stay behind me. Arden will try every trick he knows to separate us." They moved quickly, darting from cover to cover, avoiding sensors and slipping into the tunnel through a rusted hatch almost invisible beneath the snow. The air inside was stale and cold, but the walls felt familiar beneath Mason's gloved hand. Every step forward felt like a step back through time, memories of brutal training exercises and late-night strategy sessions flooding back. Alina followed close, Vaylor slung over one shoulder like a sack of potatoes. He was still unconscious, but Mason could feel the weight of his presence, both physical and symbolic. The fourth assassin, captured but not yet dead, could still be a valuable asset or a dangerous liability. As they approached the tunnel's exit, Mason stopped abruptly, holding up a hand. A soft click echoed from somewhere ahead. Tripwire. He reached into a pouch and pulled out a small mirror, angling it carefully around the corner. His breath caught for half a second. It was exactly what he expected and exactly what he dreaded. Arden had laid an ambush even here, a narrow choke point guarded by automated turrets and a grid of motion sensors. But Mason also recognized his own handiwork. These defenses were old, patched together with equipment Mason himself had installed years ago. And he knew every flaw. He turned back to Alina, a wry grin on his face. "This is personal. He left these here knowing I would recognize them, knowing I would see them as a challenge." Alina's voice was tight with fear. "Can we get through?" Mason nodded. "Oh yeah? Watch this. He pulled a small device from his belt and attached it to the nearest wall panel. A faint hum filled the air as the device interfaced with the outdated circuits. Mason's fingers flew over the controls, bypassing lockouts and rewriting protocols with casual ease. Within seconds, the grid of sensors blinked offline and the turrets swiveled harmlessly away from their path. They continued forward until the tunnel opened into the central hub of the facility, the old command center. It was dark, lit only by the glow of flickering monitors and the slow pulse of status lights. At the center of it all stood a figure Mason knew too well. General Arden. His uniform was crisp, his posture as rigid and commanding as ever, but there was something wrong in his eyes. They glowed faintly, a sickly pale blue, and his expression was too smooth, too calm. He had been augmented, neural implants overriding whatever humanity was left inside him. His voice was exactly as Mason remembered, smooth and confident. Mason. I knew you would come. You never could resist a challenge. I taught you that. Mason kept his weapon trained on Arden as he stepped closer, his own voice steady but filled with controlled fury. Why, Arden? Why betray Earth? Arden smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Earth is weak. The Galactic King offered me a place in the new order. Power beyond imagination. And you were always my finest student. It's only fitting that you should be my last test. The doors behind Arden slid open, revealing rows of automated combat drones, their weapons primed and aimed. Elena gasped softly, but Mason didn't flinch. He lowered his weapon deliberately, meeting Arden's glowing gaze. You know how I think, Mason said slowly. You taught me everything I know. But you made one mistake, Arden. You assumed I wouldn't adapt. He pressed a button on his wrist device. Instantly, every drone in the room turned its weapons on Arden instead of Mason. Arden's smug expression faltered for the first time. What did you do? Mason stepped forward, eyes cold and hard. I rewrote the entire command structure while you were watching the front gate. Your network was built on the same outdated systems you taught me to exploit. Everything you control now answers to me. Arden's face twisted in rage as the drones fired. It was over in seconds. When the smoke cleared, Mason approached the fallen body of his former mentor, kneeling briefly beside him. He closed Arden's lifeless eyes gently. You taught me well, old man. Then he stood and turned to Elena, who was still frozen in shock. We're not done yet, Mason said. Arden was the last assassin, but the Galactic King will know he failed soon enough. We need to be ready. As they made their way back through the facility, Mason paused once to glance over his shoulder. The ghosts of the past were finally behind him. But a larger war was coming, and Mason Kane was already planning how to win it. The wind howled as Mason and Elena stepped back out into the open, snow swirling around them and the smoldering wreckage of what had once been a proud Earth military installation now reduced to a silent graveyard. Mason felt the weight of it all as he led Elena away from the ruins. The fifth assassin was down, but it wasn't over. Not even close. The Galactic King would already know. Mason could feel it in the air, in the way the clouds seemed heavier, as if the sky itself was waiting for the next move. He had won every fight so far, but the next one would not be a fight. It would be a war. As they trudged through knee-deep snow toward an old extraction point Mason had prepared years ago, Elena spoke quietly, her voice almost lost in the wind. Why did you leave this life, Mason? Why retire if you knew all this could come back? Mason didn't answer immediately. He glanced sideways at her, at the woman who a few days ago had been blissfully unaware of galactic politics and assassins, who now carried the weight of Earth's survival without hesitation. Then he spoke, voice rough but honest. I didn't leave because I was tired. I left because I was too good at it. Every mission completed, every enemy defeated, but it never ended. I started realizing that the more I won, the more enemies Earth collected. I thought maybe if I stepped away, the galaxy would forget about us for a while. He laughed bitterly. Looks like that didn't work. Elena nodded slowly, but her mind was elsewhere. She was thinking about how the Galactic King had reacted to her research. All she had done was study snail mucus, a bizarre niche interest that now threatened the power of a galactic empire. She felt insignificant, and yet somehow central to a galactic chess game she didn't even understand. Mason interrupted her thoughts with a grim chuckle. "We're about to get company." She stiffened, scanning the empty snowfield ahead, but saw nothing. Mason gestured skyward. "Not there. Up." A faint hum became audible, growing louder, until a shadow passed over them. Massive ships, dozens of them, sliding out of low orbit and descending into Earth's atmosphere. The king wasn't sending assassins anymore. He was sending a fleet. Mason didn't panic. Instead, he knelt, pulled out a battered communicator and switched it on. Static crackled, followed by a gruff voice on the other end. "Mason? Is that you?" Mason grinned. "Backup's here," he said simply. Within moments, the ground itself seemed to shift as hidden silos and bunkers all across the frozen landscape opened, revealing sleek missile batteries and anti-orbital cannons long dormant, but meticulously maintained. Mason had been preparing for this for years, seeding Earth's defenses everywhere he went. The Galactic King thought he was attacking a world that had grown soft. He was wrong. As the first wave of dropships descended, Mason took Alina's arm and hurried her into a command bunker hidden beneath a grove of evergreens. Inside, the walls were lined with old but fully operational systems, each showing status feeds from around the globe. Mason worked quickly, issuing rapid-fire commands to Earth's orbital defense network while explaining to Alina what was happening. "The assassins were just the beginning," he said. "The king never expected them to succeed. They were meant to soften us up, gauge our response, learn our weaknesses. The fleet is the real attack." Alina sat beside him, staring at the monitor that showed the incoming ships. "Can we stop them?" she asked. Mason's answer was immediate and fierce. "No. But we can hurt them. We can make this cost more than they are willing to pay. And then we take the fight to them." As the first enemy ship broke through the atmosphere, the skies erupted with Earth's counterattack. Missiles streaked upward, interceptors screamed across the clouds, and orbital cannons spat fire at the descending armada. One ship exploded in a blinding fireball, then another, but the king's forces kept coming. Mason directed the battle with calm precision, every order crisp, every move calculated. Alina watched him, realizing that this was what he was made for. She had met a man who looked like a recluse, a bitter old soldier hiding in the woods, but here he was in his element. The world burned and he thrived in the chaos. Then a voice broke through the comms, cold and regal. "Mason Kane," came the voice of the Galactic King himself. "You are impressive. Your planet's defenses are impressive. But this ends now. You cannot win." Mason leaned toward the microphone, his expression hard. "Your assassins failed. Your armies will fail too. And after this, I'm coming for you." The king laughed, a deep, mocking sound. "You think I sent my real fleet, Mason Kane? This is a demonstration. While you fight here, I have already moved against your off-world colonies. Your precious Earth is alone." The color drained from Alina's face as the implications sank in. Mason stayed perfectly still, his mind racing. The king was bluffing. He had to be. But what if he wasn't? Then Mason did something that startled even Alina. He laughed. A long, genuine laugh that carried through the bunker and out over the comms. The king fell silent, unsure how to interpret the response. Mason's voice was deadly calm when he spoke again. "I know you didn't send your best fleet. I know you're trying to make me panic. But you've made one critical mistake. You think Earth stands alone. You're wrong." The camera feeds shifted as Mason pulled up a new set of schematics. Earth's colonies had not been abandoned. Mason had been quietly upgrading their defenses for years, hidden even from Earth's own leaders. Across the solar system, automated outposts and orbital weapons platforms were coming online. He pressed a single button and sent a coded transmission. On a distant moon, a hidden fleet that Mason had commissioned long ago activated. Ships rose from beneath lunar dust, sleek and deadly, built with stolen alien technology and Earth's best weapons. The Galactic King's scouts never saw them coming. Mason's grin was feral as he watched the king's face appear on a monitor. The king's smug confidence was gone, replaced by genuine shock and fury. Earth's retaliation had begun, not just on its surface but across the void. "We're not alone," Mason said softly. "We've never been alone. And now it's our turn." Outside, the battle for Earth raged on, but Mason Kane had already shifted the balance. He stood, offering a hand to Alina. "Ready to end this?" Alina took his hand and nodded, determination burning in her eyes. Together they stepped out of the bunker into the roaring wind as the skies lit up with fire. The war had come, but Earth was fighting back. The sky burned above them as ships clashed and the air filled with the deafening roar of engines and explosions, but Mason Kane moved with a calm precision that suggested none of it touched him. He led Alina through the smoking wreckage of fallen dropships, his gaze flicking from horizon to horizon, calculating, always calculating. The Galactic King's forces had underestimated Earth's defenses, but this wasn't victory yet. This was a reprieve. The enemy was regrouping, adjusting, and the next wave would be more focused, more brutal. Mason knew that standing his ground here would only delay the inevitable. He didn't plan on standing still. He planned on finishing this. At the extraction point, a sleek transport shuttle waited, painted in Earth's old military gray, its hull pocked with scars from battles long past. The pilot, a wiry veteran who gave Mason a curt nod and a faint smirk, didn't ask questions as Mason helped Alina aboard. The cargo bay smelled of fuel and ozone, the air thick with tension. Mason moved quickly to a console and opened a secure channel to Earth's High Command, knowing full well that it wasn't safe to trust anyone but needing their resources all the same. The commander's voice crackled through the speakers. "Mason, are you leaving?" "We're holding them off here." Mason's reply was cold, efficient. "I'm leaving because holding them off isn't enough. I'm taking this fight straight to the king. While you defend the surface, I'm ending the war." Alina stood beside him, clutching her datapad tightly. Her research, which had seemed so obscure just days ago, was now a weapon capable of undermining the king's neural control systems. Mason glanced at her and spoke low enough that only she could hear. "You realize he's going to expect us, right? He'll be waiting." Alina's voice was steady. "Let him wait." Mason almost smiled. For all her quiet awkwardness, she had adapted faster than most soldiers he'd ever known. She had faced assassins, betrayal, an orbital bombardment, and she was still standing. That counted for something. As the shuttle lifted off, Mason watched the burning Earth recede beneath them. He felt no regret, no hesitation. Earth could hold. Now it was time to cut the head off the Empire. The journey through space was brief but heavy with silence. Mason reviewed every known detail of the king's flagship. It was a fortress, layered in defenses, but Mason had infiltrated worse. What mattered was timing. The king would not expect a direct assault so soon after the ground battle. He would assume Earth needed time to lick its wounds. Mason planned to use that assumption to his advantage. As the stars shifted and the massive silhouette of the flagship grew in the viewport, Mason's mind focused to a razor's edge. This wasn't about surviving anymore. This was about sending a message the entire galaxy would hear. The shuttle dropped into a dead zone beneath the flagship's main sensors, a blind spot Mason had memorized years ago from stolen schematics. Alina watched wide-eyed as Mason suited up in battered combat armor that looked like it had seen a dozen wars and somehow survived them all. He checked his weapons carefully, then handed Alina a small device. "When I give the word, activate this. It'll trigger a feedback loop through their neural network and shut down every implant connected to the king's systems." Alina's grip tightened on the device. "What if it doesn't work?" Mason shrugged. "Then I'll improvise. I always do." The shuttle clamped onto an external hatch on the underside of the flagship. Mason moved first, cutting through the hatch with a portable plasma torch, the glow reflecting in his eyes as he worked. When the hatch fell away, he climbed into darkness, every sense sharp, his instincts honed to a fine point. Alina followed, her breath quick and shallow but her steps steady. Inside, the flagship felt cold and sterile, all steel corridors and harsh lighting. No guards. No defenses. That was the first sign something was wrong. Mason knew the king wasn't careless. This was deliberate. As they moved deeper, Mason spoke without turning. This is a trap. He's letting us in. Alina swallowed hard. Then why are we walking straight into it? Mason's answer was simple. Because it's the fastest way to get to him. The corridors led them unerringly to the throne room, a vast chamber where the king sat on a dais of black metal, surrounded by floating holograms and glowing interfaces. His robe shimmered like oil, his face impassive, his gaze fixed on Mason as if this confrontation had been inevitable. Mason Kane, the king said smoothly, his voice carrying a weight of centuries. You are alone. Again. Always alone. Mason's grin was sharp and dangerous. Not this time. He glanced at Alina, a silent cue. She raised the device and activated it. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the flagship seemed to groan as power surged erratically through its systems. Lights flickered, consoles sparked, and the holograms around the king distorted into nonsense before vanishing entirely. The king's expression didn't change, but Mason saw the tension in his shoulders, the tightness in his jaw. The neural network was failing. The control he had held for so long was crumbling in real time. Mason stepped forward, every movement deliberate, his voice low but deadly. You sent 5 assassins. You invaded my planet. You underestimated a biologist, and you underestimated me. And now you've lost everything. The king stood slowly, his gaze still cold but his voice harder now. This changes nothing. My empire stretches across thousands of worlds. Earth is insignificant. Mason took another step, leveling his rifle at the king's heart. Earth was insignificant to you. But now every world that ever hated you is watching. The rebellion you feared has already begun. Even as he spoke, Mason's comm unit pinged silently. Reports flooded in from distant systems where uprisings had already broken out as soon as word spread that the king's neural network was down. The empire was unraveling. The king lunged, far faster than Mason expected, a blade appearing in his hand, gleaming and sharp. But Mason didn't flinch. He moved with lethal efficiency, catching the king's wrist and driving the butt of his rifle into the side of his head. The king staggered, but Mason didn't let go. He pivoted, twisted the blade from the king's grip, and in a single smooth motion, drove it straight into the king's chest. The king froze, eyes wide, breath caught. Mason's voice was quiet but final. No more assassins. No more empires. The king fell. Mason stepped back, breathing hard but steady. The war was over, not because Earth had won a grand battle but because Mason Kane had done what no army could do. He had ended the king himself. Alina stepped forward, standing beside him as they looked down at the fallen ruler. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Mason reached up and tapped his comm unit. Earth Command, this is Mason Kane. The king is dead. Prepare for a new galaxy. As the flagship's systems flickered and failed, Mason and Alina turned toward the docking bay where their shuttle waited. They walked side by side through the crumbling empire, 2 humans who had brought down a galactic tyrant, knowing the galaxy would never be the same again. The fight was over. But the future was just beginning. And Mason Kane was already planning what came next.